It's Thursday, October 31st, 2019, Halloween. And this is the Pro and Con Show. And I'm your host, Michael James Ott. And in the interest of consistency, which I am nothing but consistent, notice no Halloween get up or anything, it's just plain old me. Happy Halloween out there. Anyway, so the whole Pro and Con Show is all about trying to get people to be open to opposing views. And to focus on the facts and stay away from all the rhetoric out there, all of the emotional biased kind of stuff that's out there. And we can all do this, and we'll all be far better off if we do. So today, rather than talk about the different information streams and some of the bias that's in them about the current news, and the current news continues to be the back and forth on impeachment now of Mr. Trump. So let's focus, as I said in just one of the previous shows, that there's some issues, and we as a society, as a country, as a community, we should talk about the issues and resolve them, work to resolve the issues. So, I talk about the need to listen to opposing views, and there's a good reason for that. So this is a coin, and I'm doing my best to hold it here so you can see that there's an image of Eisenhower. This is an old 1971 silver dollar, okay? And you can clearly see an image of Eisenhower, at least, from where you're sitting. So from where you're sitting, you were born where you were born, raised where you were raised, children, whatever in your life, education, spouses, work, all those things right up to this moment. And in this moment, watching this video, you see an image of this coin and you see Eisenhower. Now I can sit here and, I was born and raised, siblings, education, all the way up, work, all this stuff, all the way up until now. And I see an image of an eagle on the same coin. And you can sit there and say, well, wait a second, that's Eisenhower. And I can sit there and say it's an eagle. And in fact, we can call each other stupid. And we can stand on opposite sides of the street and we can yell and scream and fling rocks at each other. But the reality is that, the facts of the thing very much come down to your perspective. And your perspective is based on where you come from. So if I flip this coin over, you can see, hopefully you can see, I'm trying to get it so everyone can see it. Get closer to the camera. There is indeed an image of an eagle on the opposite side of the coin. Okay, so the truth is that, based on your perspective, you did not see the eagle. Based on my perspective, I did not see Eisenhower. But the reality is the coin, the whole coin, okay, both sides and the edge. That's all, the whole coin, the whole story of the coin is all of that, okay? Pro and con, good and bad, for and against. And the reason why I bring this up is because, as we talk about the issues before our country, and I'll bring up the coin over and over and over again, we have to be open to this fact that we have limited knowledge and limited perspective, and we need to at least open our minds to the idea that we haven't seen it all up to now, and to get people to help us see what we haven't seen, to see the other side of the coin. So let's talk about, the show I called today is violence, and specifically I want to talk about gun violence and guns. So depending on where you were, where you've lived, what you've done and all that, your perspective of guns can be very much different than somebody else's. And I'm going to use myself, and I'm going to use one of my brother-in-laws as difference, in that perspective. So me personally, I was not raised around guns. That was not anything in my family. It was not prevalent in my family. Where I was raised, generally the crime rate was quite low. And there were people that had guns, of course, and they used them mostly for hunting. Every once in a while, they'd use them for skeet shooting. And I remember as kids, I think there was one of the local guys would give us a nickel. They would skeet shoot and some of the clay pigeons would not get damaged. You know, they would miss them, and they'd be laying out in this field, and so they would pay us, I think it was a nickel a pigeon to go out and collect these things. So we were all, you know, whatever, 7, 8 years old, whatever, happy to run out there and try to find as many of these things as we could. But that's, so, you know, from my perspective, you know, guns were not anything close to being a significant part of my life. And then, you know, there's ongoing stories about all the bad things that happen with guns, you know, all the robberies and you know, murders and suicides and all this other stuff. So from my perspective, guns generally are something to be very concerned about. Okay. And you know, I guess at least in my view, you know, not a lot of very positive stuff. Now, let's take the perspective of my brother-in-law, one of my brother-in-laws. So he was raised in a home where hunting was, you know, really a big part of family tradition. And his father, and I think his father before him, maybe his father before him, they had, you know, had a tradition of you know, hunting and huntsmanship. And they would, you know, and of course guns were a big part of that. And so even at a very young age, one of my brother-in-laws was you know, brought up with guns and you know, learned how to shoot and taught, you know, meticulous safety kinds of things, which even today he mentions to me that he, you know, he's very proud to be a gun owner and happy that he's a gun owner, and he continues to hunt today. But he also is very adamant that he feels strongly that you know, gun owners, you know, should be thoroughly trained and be very careful about, you know, with following all the rules around gun safety. And he's absolutely right. And so, but again, from his perspective, you know, guns were a part of family life and part of what he enjoyed and part of sport and you know, and from his perspective, he thinks and feels, because of what he's done and where he's been, that guns are, you know, can be a very meaningful part of family tradition and you know, father-son relationships and so on. And so, and all of that's valid. That's the whole point behind what I'm saying today, is all of that is absolutely valid. It's absolutely valid. And so what we need to do is you know, take this perspective, and I'll add one more thing that you know, I haven't talked about to this point, and that was the main reason why the amendment the amendment in the Constitution is there, you know, guaranteeing the right to bear arms was for, not for hunting and stuff like that, but for the idea that, you know, that was a major source of enablement for us to throw away or throw off the burden and of the bondage of us to a monarchy. We were able to establish a republic, mostly because a lot of people back in the day, you know, had firearms. It was a necessity back then. Okay, you had to go and hunt. A lot of the food that you had or that you ate, you know, you went out and you hunted it. So, and so all of this is all factual stuff. And now let's go take it one step further. Okay, so now I would say that all guns are very, very powerful instruments, especially modern weapons. Modern weapons, wow, they're the quality of the rifling in the barrels and the ammunition and the you know, the firing mechanisms and all that. It's just unbelievably high quality stuff. And what that means is that guns are incredibly effective at what they're intended to do, which is, you know, fire a bullet at something and destroy it. Okay, so whether that's a target or an animal or a human, they're extremely effective in doing what they tasked to do. And so, and I'm not going to go into, these are only 10 or 15 minute little shows that we do here. I'm not going to go into all the detail that we could over a couple of days, but we really should, look at this from all different perspectives and appreciate, all the facts. So guns are extremely powerful instruments. There's 320 million of them in this country. They are different types. So some of them are like single shot, bolt action kinds of guns that, all the way up to, various military weapons and stuff like that. And on even beyond that, armament, that can be a lot of things. And so then, step back and say, okay, here's all the facts. And on top of that, these negative things happen. So there's some good things happen and some bad things happen. So given that there's good and bad, how do we promote the good and secure the good, and how do we try to eliminate or mitigate the bad, right? And I guarantee you that in the case of guns and gun violence, it's not just the guns. I mean, and certainly, more training, maybe some rules about age or something, just like, driving a car or whatever. There's structures that would help in regard to the guns themselves, and who can drive, for example, you have to have a certain license to drive a semi truck versus a passenger car. And all of that makes sense. So there could be, variations in license for, different weapons of different design and so on. And again, I'm not, but the point is, let's talk it through step by step. So let's understand the good, understand the bad, understand the whole thing, and then step by step, let's talk about, keeping the good and mitigating or minimizing the bad. And again, it's not just the guns. It's talking about society and our awareness of each other. And maybe we have to have programs where we have just community training, community awareness kinds of stuff, where these certain individuals, maybe there's certain profiles of individuals who are more of a concern, and generally all of us, if there's some major thing happening in our lives that's some kind of major disconnect in what's going on in our lives, well, that can cause us to really have some really strong emotions that maybe we don't normally have. And maybe people who own guns at that point, maybe there has to be kind of a special consideration around them, and maybe some programs where there's counseling or counseling, and some of the guns are momentarily taken away, kinds of things, prevent suicides, and maybe someone shooting up a movie theater or whatever. Okay, so I can't believe that anyone watching this video and with any inkling of openness to anything wouldn't think that what I'm saying isn't a reasoned, reasonable, honest, fair way to go about this. Okay? So that's what we should do. And as we go forward, there's going to be many other issues I'm going to be talking about over the next weeks and months. And when we do, and I'm sure I'll come back to gun violence at some point, just kind of, we talk about these on a regular basis. Let's think these things through and focus on the facts, and focus on the understanding that, our perspective, our original perspective, isn't the full perspective in many cases. And we need to open our eyes and our hearts and our souls to this idea that, there's more learning to be done. And then once we have the full picture, we've got the total perspective. Now let's talk about fair and reasonable ways forward. All right, so today's show is on violence and gun violence, and this has been the Pro and the Con Show. I'm your host, Michael James Ott. Look forward to talking to you again real soon. And until then, Bye for now.